Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays, kids more.
Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy, Mr.BandClap, and we in the building with another podcast, y'all. Shout out to Hood Mystic. This gonna be a two-parter, or maybe a three-parter. Just talking about some aspects of female nature. Talking about the imprint. Shout out to Rom Wills. He broke that down beautifully in his video. I just want to break it down in a more spiritual aspect. Also talking about the Orishas too, like I always do. So without further ado, we got a lot to talk about. So let's get the show on the road. Alright, y'all, so we back. Welcome to another BandClap TV Podcast. I know it's been a little minute since I've done one of these. I've just been battling within myself trying to figure out what I actually want to touch on. And this podcast is going to be a little different than the ones that I've been doing in regards of this is a part one to a discussion about female nature, about the spiritual aspects when you're talking about masculinity as well as the divine feminine, which every human on the planet is derived from. There's a huge discussion about this. There's a rise of MGTOW men who's going their own way, so to speak. You have women out here that are beautiful on the outside, but internally they're trying to figure out, even though they're beautiful on the outside, why they can't keep a successful relationship or why they can't keep a man. And then on the flip side, you have a lot of men that are wondering why they felt like they was in a successful relationship, but all of a sudden this guy comes along out of nowhere or something like that, and it just changed her whole demeanor towards him, and he just lost his girl. She's gone with the next guy, and he's just sitting there like, what's going on? Was it me or whatever? And see, when I was coming up, I grew up in a very Christian household, which is something that I'm not ashamed of. I mean, I love my parents. They taught me right from wrong. But one thing that I found out growing up was that as I got older, the main people that my mom and dad would tell me to stay away from were the main people that once I did end up hanging around some of these people, the stuff that they taught me, I feel like if I didn't learn it from them and I get out here and get caught up in the streets, I'd be somewhere in jail or somewhere dead, not here giving y'all this podcast. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So on these podcasts, when I talk about game related subjects, I always like to give a shout out to all the PIs and the OG men as well as women who broke down the game to me at an early age so that I wouldn't be out here having a whole bunch of kids out of wedlock and crying and want to fight a girl if she don't want to be with me or things like that, because I was already prepared. I was already equipped with certain tools that in the generation that I'm seeing now, since I'm an adult, a lot of these guys don't have that network of people anymore who are willing to just give you game, and especially not for free. And I remember as a kid, I used to watch wrestling, and you know, if anybody knows Ric Flair, he's the Hugh Hefner of wrestling. I mean, he always had the finest women, always carried himself as a alpha male / pimp type character on the wrestling scene. And one of the lines that he said really stuck with me, but it took me a while to learn what it actually meant when he said it. And he said, "She ain't your girl, it's just your turn." And hearing that as a kid, I was like, yo, what the hell is he talking about? Because I was still in that way of thinking that once I acquire something, it's mine forever. I mean, as kids, that's what we always think, that when mom and dad buys us something, it's ours. It's my toy. It's my bike. It's my game. But one day when you're older, or when you're tired of playing with that toy, or when that bike gets broken or something like that, that same thing that you used to say is mine forever, you're not thinking of it the same no more. Now you found something else that catches your attention, and you're quickly to throw away what initially you would fight another kid over if they took that toy from you. So in other words, that can be said for women as well when it comes to imprint, which is going to be what I'm going to talk about today in my podcast. Like I said in the intro, shout out to Hood Mystic, because we're going to do another podcast where me and him both will be on video talking about other aspects of this, because you have an epidemic that's going on where women are more free in this society that we're in now in 2018 than I think ever. And women are going back to that primordial instinct, back to that childlike energy, which is their primordial energy. And I see a lot of men are going their own way. And on the other side of the spectrum, you got men that are super emotional. You got men killing their girlfriends or killing their baby moms or whatever because she cheated and stuff like that, simply because they don't understand that principle, because it's really a principle when you think about it. Nothing that's yours is truly yours, and it's kind of like a higher level thinking situation, but it's something that as a man will keep your emotions at bay just by understanding that certain principle. I mean, even in a spiritual standpoint, or even in a nature standpoint, Mother Nature is for everybody. Mother Nature don't belong to one person or a group of people. Mother Nature belongs to everybody. And the things that is on this earth are tools that Mother Nature gives us so that we can be our best selves. But at the end of the day, even though it's ours for a small moment, it's not ours forever. And we eventually have to give it back so that someone else can use that tool as well. Just like if I pick some fruit off a tree, yeah, I can say this is my fruit. But number one, if I just hoard it and I never eat it, it's still not going to do me any good, because eventually the fruit is going to die and then it'll be just a waste. Or if I eat it, and once that fruit broke down in my system and all the nutrients that that fruit gave me are no longer useful to me anymore, what does your body do? Shits it out. Then it goes back into the earth, which forms soil for another fruit tree to grow, so some other people can come and pick fruit off that tree and do the same cycle over and over and over. And in a way, in a very ancient way, this is how men and women viewed their relationship. There wasn't really a set of consequences that was put in place if a woman was, say, dissatisfied with her man or something like that. And if she wanted to leave the relationship, she would just leave the relationship. But now things are very different. But in 2018, things are slowly getting back to that. And as men, we really need to get back on our ancient way of thinking and understanding the woman, so that when that time comes in your cycle and you know that that person has served its purpose in your life, or vice versa, when it's time to let that person go and set them free, it won't be an emotional battle when it comes to that, because you have a lot of people out here, shout out to Young Pharaoh and others, who talk about the black woman is God. And even with that, it proves my point even more, because God is for everybody. God isn't just for one person, but God equally loves each and every one of God's children. Even in a cosmic standpoint, the universe gave birth to Mother Earth as well as the sun. And even though Mother Earth is for everybody, the sun ain't tripping, because the sun got 9 other planets that he has to supply sunlight to. Well, I'm not even sure how many planets there are now, because they keep adding them and taking them away, but y'all get what I mean. So if we're saying that the black woman represents the divine feminine, which is a very chaotic nature, because at the end of the day, black represents chaos, but it also represents potential. So the question is, with knowing all of this, and also about the universal laws, specifically the law of rhythm, and that everything has a cycle and you can't stop the pendulum from swinging to one side or the other, but alchemically you can either slow the pendulum down to your speed, or you can take the pendulum and control it yourself. And how does this register in a woman's perspective about men? That's where imprint comes from, because as the saying goes, a man is only as faithful as his options, but a woman is only as faithful as her imprint. Meaning a woman can have a bunch of different options while she's in a relationship with a guy or something like that, but that doesn't mean that she's just gonna give it up to any thirsty nigga that hops in her DMs. It's not that easy. But you would wonder why a woman would be in a loving relationship, even a loving marriage, but some thug guy, or what they call dog or something like that, just comes along and just sweeps them off their feet some kind of way, and now he's in your house beating down the walls while you somewhere at work, quote unquote, trying to provide for her, and you sitting here dumbfounded and you don't know why. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Shout out to Rom Wills. He did a very, very informative video about the imprint, and I'm going to touch on one or two of the points that he added about this as well. And one of the points that he talked about in his video was about when you first meet a girl, it's imperative to find out at least the first 5 guys that she slept with, because for the most part, those 5 guys are going to be the ones that shapes her imprint. Because really, to be honest with you, all an imprint is a certain feeling that was produced by a certain experience by a certain person or personality type. That's what I like to call imprint. So an example of this is, let's just say a woman loses her virginity to a jock or one of those flashy football player thug type guys, and he put it down on her, made her feel a certain way, a certain sense of euphoria. So now throughout her life, she's going to be looking for those type of guys, no matter if they treat her right or anything like that, because at the end of the day, they're just looking for that feeling again, that feeling that they felt with that first guy. And unless you know that, you're not going to be able to keep her, at least not for long, because a woman that's imprinted a certain way, they can experiment, so to speak, with a guy that's doesn't matches the imprint, which would be known as a nice guy or a simp guy or something like that, who would probably treat her right and end up being a very good husband to her. But then again, she's looking for that feeling, and if that guy can't give her that feeling, then the relationship on paper can be hella good, but she's not going to stick around. And in this day and time, in 2018, there's really not any incentive or consequences if she doesn't want to stick around. And that's the thing that's getting a lot of guys out here caught up, because they're just confused. They just don't understand why it didn't work out. And you got some women that'll be straight up with you and just tell you, like, look, you know, I was feeling you at first, but now I just don't feel that quote unquote spark no more, so I just want to see other people. And as a guy, the worst thing that you can be is emotional. because like I said before, she's not yours. It's just your turn. Everything has a cycle, even when it comes down to having children. And this is one thing that my dad used to say a lot when I was little. He'll say, once you turn 18 and you out my house, you grown. I'm not responsible for you no more. That's why I'm raising you up right now with all the tools and everything that you need. So when it's time for me to turn you loose, I'll be confident that you'll be able to make it out there in them streets. You know what I mean? So let's talk about the Orishas, because one thing that I learned about all of this rise of game coaches and dating coaches and all of this stuff, the more I look into my ancient spirituality, it kind of shows me that the game is ancient. Like the fact that I can give y'all paktis and stories about stuff that I'm hearing game coaches and dating advice coaches talking about in 2018 is crazy, which goes to show you that we never really changed from the ancient times. And hopefully with these examples that I'm going to show you, you'll be able to see a lot more where I'm coming from with that. And hopefully it'll make you want to go back and look at some of the ancient African stories and paktis for yourself, and maybe it will make you want to study and get back into some of those traditions and practices. So let's get to it. So the first example that I'm going to touch on is what happens when a holistic man imprints a woman. And a perfect example of this will be the story of Obatala and Yemaya. Now, just a little bit on Obatala. He's known as the sky god, or the Orisha of human creation. So he sits high above all of the other Orishas as far as rank goes. And Obatala is the father of the male Orishas, so to speak. Then you have Yemaya, who is the embodiment of the divine feminine. She is the mother goddess of creation. Even before Obatala came to the earth along with the other male Orishas to create, Yemaya was already there because she represents the waters, and she's pretty much the source of all life. Because I mean, if all water was taken off the earth, no one would survive. And even when you look at Yemaya's name, it's really 3 words or 3 phrases that is put in one. You got Yeye, which means mother, Omo, which is whose children, and then Eya means fish. So when you put it together, it's like mother whose children are like fish or something like that. So pretty much the union between Obatala and Yemaya is one of the greatest unions ever told. And even in that pakti, it talks about how once Obatala kind of came up in age, he threw this huge ceremony, and in that ceremony Yemaya was there. And at this time, even though Obatala was, getting old and his vitality was failing, Yemaya's, even though she was an older woman, she was an older seasoned woman. And since she's the embodiment of love and sensuality, she still had the sex drive of a damn 18-year-old. So it came a time where Obatala told Yemaya, he was like, look, I'm getting up in age. I need to be more focused on taking care of the kingdom now. And my sexual vitality isn't the way it used to be back in the day. And instead of letting you suffer, I'm going to set you free, because I know that I won't be able to satisfy you the way that I used to be able to satisfy you, which I feel like is the most Gia shit that Obatala ever done, in my opinion, because it really showed you how back in ancient times they truly believed in not holding on to something if you feel like you won't be able to use it in its highest potential, but somebody else would. So Yemaya went on to have other relationships with other male Orishas. One of these Orisha being Aganju, which is a volcanic Orisha. And when those two got together, they created the seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. Then she ended up leaving him and going to another guy, Orula, which was the great Orisha of fortune telling and divination. And when she got with him, he taught her a lot of things about divination and mysticism and things like that. And once she got what she needed from him, then she left again, because at the end of the day, no matter how good of a guy you are to that woman, if you can't compete with that imprint that's embedded in her psyche, that's embedded in her heart, she's never going to be fully satisfied with you. And in the end, because when these African stories talk about death, they don't talk about it the same way we think about it. They talk about it meaning you don't necessarily die, you just transform into a different Orisha or a different body. So around this time, Obatala transformed into what we know as Orisha Oko, which is the divine farmer Orisha that tills the earth and makes sure that all of mankind have the vegetation and things like that that's needed to sustain themselves on earth. So he pretty much turned into a younger version of himself, a younger, more vital and energetic version of himself. And as you would expect, once Oko laid eyes on Yemaya again after all of those years, they ended up right back together. So the cycle went right back to Obatala. But just like Obatala transformed, Yemaya transformed too, because every man that she got with taught her something new that would be beneficial to her path, which is the great mother goddess Orisha. So in the end, this story pretty much is an example of, if a man has a good enough imprint on a woman, and he knows that he has a good enough imprint on a woman, he can set her free confidently, let her go out there and seek and she finds something better. Now, I wouldn't advise a lot of guys in 2018 to do this, because I mean, your chick can get gone. I mean, Obatala is the god of creation for earth, so he's like the definition of masculinity. I mean, you're not gonna get no better than Obatala when it comes to a man. So you got to kind of have that mindset. Now, an example of what happens when you start out with a good imprint on a woman, but you get too comfortable and you let the woman slip between your fingertips, so to speak. And this is one of the disagreements that I had with Alpha Male Strategies, because he likes to talk about in his video that you can't learn game from a married man, because the married man isn't out here in the field like he is, constantly talking to women and constantly getting with women in this generation. So he has this thing where he feels like a married man giving you game is outdated game, because he's not out in the field, which is further from the truth. Because you got a lot of niggas out here, just because they put a ring on it, they think that that woman is just gonna be there 100%, no problems. So these men end up getting complacent. They end up getting comfortable. They stop going to the gym like they used to. They stop working out and eating right. They get a dad bod. They get a gut. They stop doing those things that kept upgrading themselves, and then some other guy comes along and just sideswipes you and just takes your girl away from you, and you're like, damn, what just happened? Because at the end of the day, when you with a girl, the game never ends. The fact that you got married, nigga, you just on stage 2 of the game or you on stage 3 of the game. But the game ain't over. The game is not over. You still got to keep upgrading yourself, and you still have to keep pushing yourself to be better and better and better, even when you're in a relationship. Because just like I was saying, if we're going to say that the black woman is God and the black woman represents that divine feminine, that divine chaos, when chaos stands still, it dies. If everything in your body stands still, it'll die. If your blood stop moving, if your eyes stop moving, if your heart stop beating, if your lungs stop moving in and out, you'll die. So it just goes to show you that even when you're with a woman, you still have to evolve. You still have to upgrade yourself. You still have to teach her things and upgrade her in a lot of ways and keep things fresh, because the minute that you get complacent, that's when you lost. So this party involves Ogun, Yemaya, and Shango, and Oya. Now, I remember talking about this when I talked about Shango and his 3 wives, but I really didn't break down fully the premise of what was going on, especially when talking about the relationship between Oya and Ogun. Now, just a little bit on Ogun. Ogun is the brother of Shango, the son of Obatala and Yemaya. This dude is like the meaning of masculinity in its most highest form, so to speak. This dude was a highly skilled tool maker. He made weapons for Obanani. He made weapons for Oya. He made weapons for Oshun, Alegba. If I could synonymize him with any character right off the top of my head, because I just got through looking at the God of War game, I would synonymize him with Kratos, because he's the god of iron. He's the Orisha of iron and working hard and war. He's a war god. He's all about being a strong warrior, clearing out things, even if it's destructively. And he's just about bringing things into order by force. Now, with all that being said, Oya was the perfect woman for Ogun. I mean, she was a warrior goddess as well. I mean, she was seductress. She was super aggressive with her winds. You know, she's the hurricane goddess, the goddess of the winds, the goddess of the storms. So on paper, they're the perfect couple. But see, Ogun spent a lot of his time working and taking care of his duties in the kingdom, which was to hunt and bring food so that all of the Orishas and all of the, people could eat. That he felt a little too comfortable and complacent when it came to Oya. He felt like she wasn't going nowhere. That's until Oya seen his brother Shango. And this is why I say being in the middle is the best place. Not to be too much on one side, too much on the other side. Because if you're too much on one side, you can get snuck behind and snuffed, sucker punched from another side. So the thing that made Oya lust for Shango was that Shango is just as masculine as Ogun. Shango is just as powerful as Ogun. But the difference between the two is that Shango doesn't have a violent heart. He got a good heart. And when he deals justice, it's not in a warlike or chaotic manner. Even when you look at lightning itself, it's a controlled blast of electricity that hits a specific point, which is what Shango was about. So it introduced another side to a man that Oya never seen before in Ogun, and it struck her curiosity, which is also something that was a recipe for disaster. So when that moment came where Shango came to Ogun's house to confront him, and the only person that was there was Oya, she seized that opportunity. And once she got a taste of that imprint that Shango had, she literally packed up all of her things, left Ogun's house, left the ring on the table, so to speak, and moved in with Shango. I mean, on some savage type shit, like, wow. But that's how it happened. And when Ogun came to confront Shango, because Ogun thought that maybe Shango drugged her, or maybe Shango raped her, or something like that, Alegba, who is always at the door, who's always in the know, told Ogun, nah, he didn't drug her. She seduced him. And then Oya confirmed it. She was like, yeah, I mean, you a good person and all of that. But it's just, when I saw Shango, he, quote unquote, lit a fire within me that I just couldn't control myself. And she instinctually acquiesced And last but not least, you got another side of the game, and it's a darker side of the game. And that's when a woman gets imprinted in the wrong way by a guy that someone on the outside may look at it as he shouldn't treat her like that, he shouldn't be like that towards her. But when you look at the woman, she's kind of welcoming that with no problem. Even though from the outside looking in, you're like, why the hell is she with that guy that's doing all that stuff to her? But the reason why is because, same thing I said before, he must have provided that euphoric feeling that in a lot of ways, especially in this example, it's more like a form of Stockholm syndrome, where you psychologically been in pain so much that you start to internalize it as pleasure. So my last example goes back to Yemaya and Ogun. Now, this is the dark side of the Yoruba stories, and it's kind of unfortunate because women are going through this now in relationships, and it's kind of crazy. But in this Pakti, it talks about how Ogun was very abusive to his mother, Yemaya. Now, some of the Paktis talk about how Ogun would actually rape Yemaya and abuse her while Obatala was at work, so to speak, out taking care of the kingdom. And the other daughters knew about it, but Ogun threatened them and told them not to speak about it. And the only person who wasn't going along with the program was Alegwa. And the reason why in the Lukumi religion, the reason why Alegba is at the crossroads is because Ogun kicked him out of the house because he feared that he was going to tell Obatala what was going on between him and Yemaya, and Alegba got lost at the crossroads and he didn't know which one to take so he could get back home. So that's just a side story. But one day Ogun came home drunk. He was about to abuse Yemaya again, and Shango came in and caught Ogun. And this is how the war between Shango and Ogun even began. This is also the reason why Shango had a vengeance for him because of what he did to his mother, and is also the reason why Shango ultimately ended up taking Oya from Ogun as a form of revenge. And do you know, with all of that being said, when Obatala and Yemaya split up and Yemaya was at home by herself and she was lonely, she started to think about that abusive relationship that her and Ogun had, and she started to think about how quote unquote rough he was and how masculine it felt and all of that. Now, this is something that I'll never understand, but it's something that I'm seeing a lot in women today as well. And do you know that out of all of the pain that Ogun put Yemaya through, Yemaya ended up going to the forest, going right back to Ogun. Now, it was just like a one night stand or whatever, but the fact that she went back to that after Shango tried to quote unquote save her from him is a testament to what's going on today, as far as a lot of men try to quote unquote save these women from these guys that they're with, when they don't realize that you can't really save them. They have to leave on their own and venture on their own and find someone else who would imprint them a different way. So I really hope that this shines a different light on the concept of imprint, because it's very important and it's something that men should know about a woman. Because if you get with a woman and you don't find out those things before you get too deep into the relationship, if you don't meet that imprint and she starts treating you differently, starts acting differently, at least you'll kind of be on the up and up and know what to expect or know how to handle that situation without being emotional about it, because emotional don't look right on any guy, period. That's not how we handle things. We handle things with our mind, not with our emotions. So that's another podcast, y'all. Thank y'all for listening. If you're still listening, thank y'all so much. And again, shout out to Rom Wills, shout out to Alpha Male Strategies, O'Shea Duke Jackson, Tariq Nasheed, all of the people that I listen to regarding these subjects. Shout out to Bobby Hemmett, shout out to Brother Panic, Jewel Pookrum, just to name a few people that I listen to a lot. All the people that inspired me. All right, y'all. So this is another episode of BandClap TV, and until next time, we out.